Probably heard that people say they make money in real estate without owning any property. Sounds too good to be true, right? That's exactly what real estate wholesalers do. In this video, I'll break down what wholesaling is, how it works, and why it's one of the easiest ways to get started with real estate investing. So first, let's define what is real estate wholesaling. A real estate wholesaler essentially acts as the middle person between a property seller or home seller and a real estate investor, or actually a home buyer. It doesn't have to be an investor. And you'll find discounted, what wholesalers do is essentially find discounted properties, put them under contract, and then assign that contract to another buyer for a fee. And so they're not actually buying the house, they're essentially selling the rights to buy the house. And so, for example, if you get a house under contract for $100,000 and then you assign it to a buyer, a flipper, and another investor to hold as a landlord for like 110, that difference, the 110 versus the 100, is the $10,000 wholesaling fee that would kind of show up on the settlement statement at closing. So now let's talk about how the wholesaling process works. Step one is you want to find motivated sellers. This is where wholesalers will spend most of their money and time. And usually you're going to have a good marketing system to find these motivated sellers. A lot of times I say wholesaling is not really real estate investing. It's really a lead generation and marketing business. So usually to find a motivated seller, someone, the wholesaler is going to need to, find someone with motivation to sell fast at a discount. So the types of properties here are properties that are kind of dated or need of serious repairs. And other types of lists they'll go after are type of foreclosures, people behind on their monthly payments, probates. So as there's a death in the family, and the family just wants to sell grandma's or their parents' house quickly. They don't want to deal with it, moving out and getting rid of stuff. And then there's a slew of other types of lists that people market to as well. Step two is, you want to get the property under contract. So once you get your phone ringing, you call, you set up an appointment to walk the property. That's then when the wholesaler meets with the wholesaler meets with the home seller, and they kind of come to terms of agreement and they sign a contract. And basically the wholesaler saying they agree to buy it at this price, and then they have the right to assign the contract. Next, what a wholesaler does is step three is essentially find the cash buyer or an investor. They want to usually deal with cash buyers just because they might only have 30 days to find a buyer and it's a quicker close. So these wholesalers will look to their existing cash buyers list that they created, or just market it on different sites like, Facebook Marketplace, and then or mail postcards or email blasts to their existing buyers list. And then step four is once they find that buyer for that higher price than what they got it under contract for, they'll create an assignment of contract where they'll basically state that this new buyer will now take over the property, and here's the fee they're paying the wholesaler for this assignment of contract. And then at settlement, right, the wholesaler is going to get essentially paid that assignment fee. So those are the five steps. Now let's talk about how wholesalers make money. And you're essentially, it's pretty easy. You're just paid the difference between the contract price and then what the buyer's willing to pay. That's the oversimplification of it. Typically, wholesaler fees I've seen anywhere from a few $1,000s to as high as like 25,000 plus dollars, depending on the deal. And the key is to finding motivated sellers at deeply discounted properties that investors can still profit even after those renovations. Now, another question people ask a lot is wholesaling legit? And if done correctly, yes. In some states, you might have to be licensed. We could create a separate video on that, but overall, like, you must have basically a valid purchase contract, disclose that you're assigning your interest to your home seller. And then some states require, like I mentioned, like a license if you market the property, not just the contract. So you always want to check your state laws and talk to the local real estate attorney to make sure you're doing it right and properly. For example, me and Paul sometimes wholesale our properties, but we actually don't assign contracts. We're buying through like banks, and those contracts are not assignable. So we'll actually buy it, we'll call it take it down, own it. We can take deed, and then we'll resell it as is on the MLS. That's another type of wholesaling. I call that wholesaling 201, not wholesaling 101, because we actually own the property and then reselling. And all these kind of licenses that I just talked about is not valid since we actually purchased the property and not assigning a contract. Next section we'll talk about is what are some successful skills that wholesalers need to run a successful business. First one is marketing, right? You got to find motivated sellers and buyers to get houses under contract and then find a buyer for them. So you have to have a really good marketing program in place. Next, you're gonna have to have negotiation skills, right? Getting the contracts at the right price from the home sellers and then maximizing your value and understanding the numbers on how to sell the property to investors. And then last, and another example is networking, right? You got to build relationships with investors, local agents, title companies, everything else. You want to hear deals coming, that way you get them first, and then you could kind of flip them to or sign them to your end buyer. And then you have to know your numbers. That's the biggest pet peeve I have with wholesalers. They don't know how to calculate after repair value correctly or the repair cost. And then they don't bake in financing costs, holding costs in their numbers as well. So I'd say about 90% of wholesalers don't really understand the basics of the deal and all the numbers, and then 10% probably do. So if you want to stand apart from other wholesalers out there, especially on selling the contract, the deal, knowing the numbers, and it adds a lot of credibility that an end buyer like me could understand that, hey, this is a deal. I'll look a little bit more into it. Now, what are some tools that wholesalers use? So, you know, driving for dollars, some people do. There's different apps out there that could find vacant properties for you, even. I've in the past even talked to local mailman about like, hey, if you know any properties, let me know, type of thing. There's different skip tracing. So if you find these properties that are vacant or condemned or whatever, who's the owner, right? There's skip tracing services to help you identify and batch, who are the owners, what's their contact information, mailing address, emails, phone numbers, etc. And then you got to create your own cash buyers list. And probably a good way to do that is just networking in different like Facebook groups, real estate meetups, and other things like that. Got a video actually on our channel called 33 Ways to Find Cash Buyers. Feel free to check that out. And then you're going to need a CRM system, client relationship management system to kind of manage all the incoming leads and follow-ups. Because a lot of times with properties, when you market to home sellers, you're not going to get it done on your first mailing or your first text message or your first phone call. You got to set in bi-weekly, monthly, whatever the cadence is, follow-ups with these home sellers to, um, you know, keep in front of them. So when are ready to sell, they contact you first. And the same thing goes with buyers. If you have a buyer walk the house, follow up with them that night or that next morning to see if they're interested and why not if they aren't. So some pros and cons to wholesaling. Some of the pros are no need for large amounts of cash or credit to buy the house. However, if you really want to turn it into a business, you're going to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars a month on marketing and such as like, Google pay-per-click ads and mailers and everything else. It's a quick way to, it's a good potential to get some quick profits. If you buy and just quickly sign a contract, you don't have to do like a 6-month rehab. So you could get paid in like 35 to 40 days if you find a deal and assign it and you need some quick cash. And it's for a lot of people, it's a stepping stone earlier in their career of real estate investing as an entry point into real estate investing. Now the cons are, there's, income's inconsistent and really depends on finding the deals and, how good of a marketer are you and all the systems in place that you have and, how good of a negotiator are. So you have to really refine your marketing and sales skills essentially. And then, like I mentioned, some of the other cons, it's a gray area in some states if not structured properly. So the key takeaways on the video here is real estate wholesalers don't buy homes, they control deals. The success comes from finding discounted properties and connecting them with the right buyers. And it's one of the fastest way to build experience and cash in real estate investing. So if you want to learn how to find motivated sellers or build your first wholesale pipeline, hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll share future videos on these topics.